Let's talk a little bit about your work and your principles of success, if we can. And I don't know that we have time for all of them, but share whatever it is you would like to share. Maybe you could start with the psychology of winning and talk about the way it's organized. I found that particularly interesting when I discovered it many years ago, and how you have a sort of a philosophy or a mindset that translates into an action habit. Tell us about that.
Well, I think, first of all, it's very important to know that winning and losing are habit forming, and we learn by observation, imitation, and repetition. And almost everything we're going to become is based upon the exposure that we have. And so growing up as a boy, I realized that coming from a negative environment, which I did, that I needed to find role models and mentors that had proven track records of success. So my very first premise was that you need to be careful of who you choose to learn from. And if you're in a negative environment, it's very important to read and study and learn and listen to the biographies of people who have overcome enormous handicaps to become successful. In other words, you have to study winners in order not to be a loser. In my mind, when I wrote The Psychology of Winning, I was losing. So I wrote The Psychology of Winning to remind myself of everything I was not doing that I needed to do, that people over time were doing it. And I learned that during these tough times that everyone went through, that they didn't recognize that they were becoming winners, because you have to go through the baptism of fire many times to become a winner. So I began to develop these principles, and they were all they had self in front of them. There was self-esteem, there was self-awareness. Self-awareness was the first one. You have to be aware that you have potential. And the way to be aware that you have potential is to discover the natural talents that you have, discover what you do when you play after school, what you love to do. In other words, if you look at your passion, the things that you love to do during your free time, you'll discover your passion. Most people work for money, and yet their passion many times is in their free time or their avocation. What if you could take your passion to work? What if you were like a scientist or a musician or a golfer or someone who loved what he or she did and also did it as a living? Well, if you can't do that because you're already employed and maybe your passion is your hobby or your family, it's still important to find out what you're good at, find out what your strengths and weaknesses are, of course, play to your strength, and therefore to become much more aware of where you are in life, because only knowing where you are can you have a GPS satellite system to take you where you want to go, which would be your goal. The second thing in terms of awareness would be this idea of internalized value, and I think it's probably, we could spend the whole time talking about the authentic meaning of inner value or self-esteem. That's been the most over-franchised, over-exaggerated term. Many people think that self-esteem is being able to do a backflip in the end zone after a touchdown or after every play that you make as a lineman or a defensive or offensive back to strut your stuff on the football field. No, that's the arena. And the arena is a showman carnival kind of thing, and that's not self-esteem. Most people with self-esteem rarely flaunt it. Since you have the real thing, you don't have to flaunt a loud imitation. So self-esteem is the deep down feeling of your own worth, regardless of your current level of performance. In other words, self-esteem has two parts. First, I see potential in me. If you can have a coach or a mentor or a role model or a friend or a parent who sees world-class potential in you and convinces you that you have it, then you become motivated to test your potential by going out and learning, and you're motivated to learn because you're hungry to seek your potentials. And then the second part of self-esteem is not only the feeling that you have potential, but it is the experience of having little teeny successes where things work out well in the local area. And suddenly when you get results, even in a very small way, it's called self-efficacy, and it gives you the fuel to have more risk, take more chances, and have higher expectations. And you get in the groove like making three-point shots or making free throws. The more you make them, the more in the zone you get. The more success you have, the hungrier you get. And it's like priming the pump. So I think it's extremely important to feel you're as good as the best, but not any better than the rest, that all the value you were ever given was given to you when you were conceived. You'll never get another ounce of value or talent. All you'll be able to do is cut and polish and shape the gemstone that you were given at your conception and bringing that value externally from inside out. And if you can feel the inner value of the inner winner, it will motivate you to test your potential against world-class standards. And that's the only reason we have world-class standards, is so that you can test yourself against the best. That's why we have Olympians, not necessarily to win the gold, but to test yourself against a fast field of champions.